Isquis Chichewasket, Pamela Barnes. It's my honor today to formally welcome you to the Syilx territory. And so before I do that, I want to share with you a little bit about what our lands mean to us. In this part of Turtle Island, which is how we refer to North America, the sharing of our lands with peoples from other places is fairly recent. It's about 200 years. Where other parts of Turtle Island, that history goes back 500 years, 1,000 years, depending on where you're speaking of. But here it's fairly recent. And with those coming together of different peoples from different places, came some new ideas about human relationship to the land, and that are very different from our traditional viewpoint about our relationship to the lands. And so one of those concepts is the idea of ownership, human ownership of land. And we as Syilx people see ourselves more of borrowing these lands from our great-great-great-great-grandchildren. We look at things in 7 generations. And there's a very big difference between those two ideas. So if I own this necklace, I can sell it, I can trade it, I can give it away. It's mine, I can do what I want. It's up to me how I choose to care for it. I can take great care, or I can toss it aside. Again, it's mine. I can do what I want with it. If I borrow this necklace, everything changes in those relationships. I cannot sell it. I cannot trade it. I cannot give it away. And there's an expectation that I take the very best care possible. And when I leave it or return it, that at least it's in the same condition I found it in, and if at all possible, in better. So those ideas are very different. And it's with that understanding of our relationship to these lands that we first welcomed people to the traditional unceded territory of the Syilx people. And so it's with that understanding that today I welcome you to the traditional unceded and currently occupied territory of the Syilx people, with the gentle reminder that none of us, including ourselves as Syilx people, are taking the very best care possible of these lands for all of our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and so on and so forth. Limlim.
Why limlim? Kulun chuten kan wist. Tali hastis puus kana lab. Apanas khalkhald. Why chkitski khayat nakhul. Why kuts to willig. Tali hasti ikkel jayatstim. Ikkel mrimsten. Ikkel siur. Ikkel stiltsel. Ikkel skwank. Yatstim why khulal. Why skepchamul. Kekamis stjaak. Miku taku otikal temhula. Kukaus witsum. Kukaus tikum. Te jayatstim. Tali hastis puus kitskala. Utlut kushanum tulnych kui. Utlutak shanum. Tali hastis puus. Tluwikinsen. Apanas khalkhald. Thank you, Creator, for allowing me to say a few words and a little prayer. Oh, I'm very, very happy that you have arrived here today. All the things that we do in a good way. At this time of year, it's springtime, and our people are going to go on the land and collect medicines and dig roots. And that's going to turn into summer. And then summertime, we're going to pick berries and go on the land and enjoy the land. The land is very beautiful. And it don't matter if it's raining or sun shining. The land is beautiful as we are, as you are. And I'm glad you got here safe and sound and that you return home to your home safe and sound. Thank you very much, my friends and relatives. Limlimt. Thank you. Have a good day. Wait.
Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Victoria Burge, and I'm the Education Coordinator of Adult Programming here at the Kelowna Art Gallery. And on behalf of the Board of Directors and staff, I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And I will begin this evening's talk by acknowledging that the land on which the gallery stands is the unceded traditional territory of the Okanagan Silks people. Now tonight we are heading into our second last lecture of our BOMBHEAD lecture series, which accompanies the BOMBHEAD exhibition that is on display here at the gallery for just a few more weeks. It'll be closing on July 18th, so if you haven't had the chance to come down and see it in person, I highly recommend that you do, because it's definitely worth checking out if you get the chance. BOMBHEAD is a touring exhibition that is organized and circulated by the Vancouver Art Gallery and is presented here at the Kelowna Art Gallery with the support of our sponsor, IG Wealth Management. So tonight's lecturer is Lindsey A. Freeman, and she is joining us here tonight from Vancouver. And her talk is titled, "My Grandfather Was an Atomic Courier." Very engaging title. Lindsey A. Freeman is a writer and sociologist. Freeman is the author of Longing for the Bomb, Oak Ridge, and Atomic Nostalgia, and This Atom Bomb in Me. She is currently writing 2 books, one about the Chernobyl exclusion zone and another about the practice of long-distance running. Freeman is an Associate Professor of Sociology at Simon Fraser University, and she is originally from Atomic, Appalachia. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Lindsey. Now, before I hand it over, just a few quick housekeeping rules, which I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point. But we do ask that you save all of your questions until the last 15 minutes of tonight's lecture, when I will make my best effort to get to as many of them as possible. You can type those into the chat bar below, and just make sure that you've got your settings set to message all panelists and not on private, or else we may miss them. I should also mention that tonight's lecture will be recorded and available for future viewing on our webpage and YouTube channel. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Lindsey, and thank you so much, and enjoy tonight's talk, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here, in the expansive sense with you all. So first, before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm in Vancouver, which is the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I also want to acknowledge that today I'll be talking a lot about Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is where I'm from, and the Atomic Appalachia, as mentioned by Victoria. And that place is the traditional lands of the Cherokee Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge that a lot of the uranium that was processed in Oak Ridge that went into the first atomic bomb that was used in Japan against Hiroshima, that devastated that city, was from the land of the Satu Dene in the Northwest Territories. So the weird thing about nuclear stuff, once you start looking at it, you see all kinds of trajectories that you don't expect. So I'll try to draw some of those connections today. Before I really get into it, I also want to thank John O'Brien, who curated the show, and to thank the Kelowna Art Gallery for having me, and especially Victoria Verge, who's made everything go so smooth so far. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you now. Okay, so hopefully you can see it. Have a little water. So today mostly I'll be talking about my work that is in these three texts. The first two Victoria already mentioned, so I won't say any more about those now. But the third that you see there with the amazing cover through Post-Atomic Eyes, I have only a small essay in, but I wanted to draw people's attention to it who may be interested in some of these themes, and that was edited by Claudette Lazon and John O'Brien. So the image that you see that has the figure with the bomb head there, which is the title image of the show, is from Bruce Connor, and it's a collage image. But what struck me when I saw this show for the very first time when it was in Vancouver was that I recognized that head, or rather, I recognized that mushroom cloud. I recognized the image of that mushroom cloud. It's quite a famous mushroom cloud. It's called the Baker Shot, which was from a set of nuclear tests done by the US military called Operation Crossroads in 1946. These tests were much more powerful than the US military intended, devastated much of Micronesia, including the Bikini Atoll, as well as large swaths of the ocean became irradiated. I'll say a little bit more about this later. But this test, this Baker Shot, this mushroom cloud, is also the backdrop of the cover of my book. And I find that this image and others like it haunt me and haunt my childhood and continue to haunt my present. So it's just, as I talk, I will be kind of oblique with my references, but I hope that they sort of add up and give you a sense of how the nuclear pervades so much of everything, even if it's invisible. So I will read mostly vignettes from my work and show you some images. I hope that they add up to something you can feel. So as the title of my talk suggests, my grandfather was an atomic courier. So that's him in the hat. He drove secret materials for the first uranium-powered atomic bomb from the Manhattan Project city of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, to various locations across the country. He liked it well enough to keep driving through the Cold War for the Atomic Energy Commission. My grandmother was a bowling enthusiast and Semesto-making homemaker. My mother, that's her in the middle of the image there with her hand to her temples. This is an image taken from her science class in about 1950 or 1969 in Oak Ridge. And this image was taken by the official Manhattan Project photographer, Ed Westcott, who continued to be an official photographer for the Department of Energy and the Atomic Energy Commission after this. So he took all sorts of images, both propaganda, everyday life. So there's images of Oppenheimer, there's images of my grandfather, there's images of my mother. My mother and my uncle went to high school in a red brick building adorned with a giant atomic symbol containing an acorn as its nucleus. The atom acorn assemblage is the symbol of the town. Not only is it the ubiquitous symbol of atomic Appalachia, but by linking the community together symbolically, It also marks a shared culture and swaps us up in its substance. For those of us in its orbit, its spinning is our spinning. Its hard acorn body, always already full of future potential, is also our collective body as we embody culture in place. The atom acorn is a concentration of all the oak ridges that have happened, never happened, might happen, and are happening, combined with the ways in which we have made sense of these happenings. I lived the first few months of my life directly under the atom acorn symbol in Oak Ridge, until my father got a job in a less interesting town in the northeast corner of the state, the finger-shaped part of Tennessee that pokes at Virginia and North Carolina. The place we went had no secret atomic past, no national laboratory, no atoms with their jaunty-capped acorns dotted the landscape. Instead, its claim to fame was a chicken processing factory in the center of town. During the first week after the move, my mother was driving my 5-year-old brother around our new town. Zooming down the road, cat a corner to the chicken factory on a sweltering July day, my mother pulled behind a truck filled with birds headed to their beheading. She had the windows rolled down because the car didn't have air conditioning. Feathers were flying everywhere. My brother shouted, "It's snowing." My mother cried for her loss, for her disappearance from atomic cosmopolitanism, and for her relocation to Morristown and the regular, less atomic American landscape. When I was young, I too felt disappointed, robbed of growing up in the science city for smart people, where the nuclear bourgeoisie rubbed shoulders with the future physicists of America, and where the Manhattan Project and the nuclear industries that followed created a new sensorium of everyday and extraordinary experiences. The connection between Oak Ridge and Hiroshima was the first big shock of my life. The facts are stark. Oak Ridge was a secret city engineered by the United States government for the sole purpose of creating fissionable uranium for the atomic bomb. The site was chosen for its proximity to the Tennessee Valley Authority Dam in Norris, Tennessee, and its steady supply of electricity, as well as for its seclusion. During World War II, in this secret location tucked between two ridges, over 75,000 people lived and labored for the war effort. Only a small fraction of workers knew what they were producing. The rest knew simply that they were working to support the Allied cause in the war. On August 6, 1945, most Oak Ridgers learned the true nature of their work from the radio, just like everyone else listening over the airwaves in other parts of the nation and across the world. Oak Ridge has been a major nuclear science and security site since its beginning, first as an important node in the Manhattan Project, later as a key production location for the nation's Cold War arsenal, and now as a place not only for the production and maintenance of parts of nuclear weapons, but also as a center for medical research, nuclear storage, national security, and the emergent nuclear heritage tourism industry. The Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Y-12 National Security Complex are still the major institutions of the city. These places are important, but the atomic sensorium is not contained in sites. It radiates throughout the city, goes underground, swims and dives through rivers and tributaries, and ignores boundaries and barriers of every stripe. I carry it in my own body. It is both outside and inside, material and immaterial, pulsing and still. My atomic immersion began when I visited my grandparents as a child and encountered the vibrant matter of Oak Ridge. As an adult, I write about the place to try to untangle its mysteries, feeling a magnetic pull and a push of memory to do so. For me, Oak Ridge is not just a city, but also an organizing system of thought, a structure of feeling, a place full of nostalgically charged objects, and a magic geography that I can't shake. I want to understand this place that shaped my life, my mother's and mine. I want to study how its aliveness and its history suffused my childhood. So I write carefully about atomic materiality and sensuality, as it sticks in and irradiates my memory. I composed a poetic sociology of what I came to sense and to feel about the place before I began trying to interpret it as a scholar by tracing spaces, objects, affects, and memories of the ordinary, the fantastic, and the atomic uncanny. I examine how people, places, things, histories, and memories are entangled and enmeshed with each other, forming images that are good to think with. So I put this here partially because I'm horrified that this is a option that you can use from Bitmoji. But I wanted to think with it. So I make myself confront it every once in a while. So I'm also, I guess, making you confront this too. In the book, The Nervous System, Mick Tausig likens the shape of the forebrain, which is thought to contain civilized consciousness, to a mushroom-shaped cloud that hangs over the midbrain, the site of memory. That thought hangs over the words to follow, and as Donna Haraway reminds us, it matters what thoughts think thoughts. My atomic childhood, I think of as a Mondrian painting. On the ordered streets and in the uniform houses of the former secret city, my grandfather's blue pickup truck fills in a square, his blue jeans color in another. My grandmother's favorite outfits in red or yellow are folded neatly into others. Their yellow house has its own square too. The women who passed by on the sidewalks of Oak Ridge were different from those I knew in Morristown because they were Mondrians. Cars and trucks tucked into driveways next to square houses were also Mondrians. My playhouse, made up of only horizontals and verticals propped up on a red-stained wooden planks, was also a Mondrian. I Mondrianated in front of it, wearing a boxy denim jumper with red buttons, a yellow t-shirt, and blonde hair. The atomic factories on the other side of town were Mondrians too. They complemented his later, more chaotic period of painting, the paintings he made in the early 1940s as an exile in New York City, the paintings that made up his own Manhattan Project. There is a picture of me sitting astride the replica of Little Boy outside of the American Museum of Science and Energy. I'm holding on with one hand and my other is in the air. My mouth is slightly ajar. This isn't the image. But in the image, it looks like this is my first rodeo. I'm riding the faux bomb like Major Kong in Dr. Strangelove, facing the tail instead of the nose, my back to the future. In front of me is the museum and the story of the bomb and its mushroom cloud, the story some call progress, but others call madness. During civil twilight on warm August evenings, I set to work collecting lightning bugs in a jar. The labs in Oak Ridge would pay you for a mason full of them. Scientific research, they said. As my grandparents lounged, I flitted around their yard, chasing the red and black flowing beetles with their magical glowing ends. This was my duty as an atomic citizen. This image is also by Ed Westcott, who I mentioned earlier. I joined the Brownies, the junior version of the Girl Scouts, because of a photograph I saw in the Oak Ridge Children's Museum that irradiated my desire to be part of a gang of girls, a troop. The black and white snap, taken in 1951 by Oak Ridge's official Manhattan Project photographer Ed Westcott, showed young atomic citizens decked out in smart uniforms, berets, kerchiefs, buttons, patches, and belts. Proud emblems and accessories of the bold new American generation. Many of them wore the black and white Oxfords that my mom called Mickey Mouse shoes. In 1963, the Boy Scouts of America issued their Atomic Energy Merit Badge, a patch with a red and blue atom stitched into a background the color of yellow cake. An equivalent badge was never issued for the Girl Scouts. No matter. The Scouts of Oak Ridge hardly needed this patch. Their uniforms were already sewn with the town's very own atom and its accompanying acorn. And what's more, they lived and breathed atomic energy. They marched past the atomic factories just as they would walk past the local drugstore or baseball field. For them, it was regular, every day. Since my scouting affiliation was based in another town, I was never able to march with my compatriots past factories born for the Manhattan Project. Instead, I was taught how to sew a potholder that looked like an enormous grape. When I learned that the new scout leader was the mother of a girl I didn't like very much, I dropped out. Instead, I prowled around alone, a composite of Davy Crockett, Nancy Drew, and Natty Gann, sporting a faux raccoon cap, worn brown corduroys, and a small red backpack where I kept my compass and mystery novels written by Carolyn Keene. Never able to live up to the image that inspired me, I lost interest in scouting and grew more intrigued with nuclear spaces and spies. I found Captain Atom in the enchanted world of the Oak Ridge Library. He was resting atop a bookcase under a stained glass window adorned with the atomic symbol. This made him seem doubly magic. I brought him down to the floor where I read cross-legged, bathed in a slash of sunlight, sprinkled with the color from the window. Reading a comic book from the beginning of the atomic age and the atomic city had a disorienting effect on me. I felt as if Oak Ridge was a place to tease time. Before he was Captain Atom, he had been Alan Atom, a scientist tucked in an aluminum rocket, a modern casing 3 times lighter than steel. When the atomic bomb inside the rocket exploded, Alan Atom and the spacecraft were completely disintegrated. As he drifted into the post-explosion liminal space between human and superhuman in a swirl of atoms and radioactivity, Alan Atom might have been thinking something like what Thomas Wolfe, the Proust of Asheville, wrote in his famous novel, Look Homeward, Angel. Wolfe wrote, I am a part of all that I have touched and that has touched me, which having for me no existence save that which I gave to it, became other than itself by being mixed with what I was and is now still otherwise. Having fused with what I am now, which is itself a culmination of what I have been becoming, why here, why there, why now, why then? In that moment, time-space had been obliterated, and all that the scientist Alan Atom had been was blown apart. Both the future and the past seemed equally uncertain. Then something fantastic happened. As he floated in the ether, he found that the essence of his human brain remained. He set to work. Atom by atom, he reassembled his body. He returned to Earth, a radioactive fallen angel, a superhero decked out in the primary colors of a Mondrian painting. He was now Captain Atom, a comic book dream, a new angel of history for a new age. But unlike Walter Benjamin's angel of history, as he was flung into space, the scientist looked away from Earth. He turned his back on the ever-piling disasters of humanity and he set his sights on the future. But the disasters, culminating in a mushroom cloud, reached him in his rocket, and the continuum of history was exploded. All the events of the past were flung across space, not yet fallout, but spread out, and invisible to the Americans who watched below through their powerful telescopes. In this fantasy, the new angel who returns to Earth is allowed to stay in order to waken the dead and make whole what has been smashed. Captain Atom lived luminously. He dreamed of peace with the Soviets. He battled evil with his atomic powers, but he didn't realize that he had become part of the emergency dressed up as progress, half echo of the past. half menace of the future. Lacustrine scenes dominated my summer memories. Proximity to murky waters and their devoted communities taught me many things. I grew to understand that swimming in lakes takes a confidence not required for pool swimming. I learned that water moccasins liked hanging out in the trees that grew out of the shallow areas near the muddy shores, and that copperheads loved the cool patches under my grandparents' lake house. My grandmother told me that my grandfather would chop off their heads with an axe to protect us, transforming the brutal act into a tender gesture. I imagined their serpentine skulls falling into a pile like pennies in a jar, buying us a secure future. I learned that my brother wasn't allowed to ride his bike to the trailer park community down the long gravel road because stuff goes on there. What kind of stuff was unimaginable to me then? I learned that Mary Lou next door was a good neighbor, and that the stuff that goes on at her house was okay to take part in. I discovered that people came to the lake to drink beer, and that if I hunted around the rocks, I could find brightly colored caps that smelled sour and metallic for my bottle cap collection. I learned that if you stomped on the golden mushrooms that grew by the mailbox, you could create a dusty, mustard-colored cloud, but if you ate them, you could die. I found out that if I forgot my bathing suit, we could get a new one at the camp store down the hill, but that I'd have to wear a two-piece instead of the swim team style one-piece Speedo I preferred. I've always felt vulnerable with my soft belly in the sun. Wrapped up in a terry cloth towel, quiet and shy in my new swimsuit, I learned from overhearing my grandfather tell my grandmother that the bikini swimsuit was named after an island place obliterated by a megaton nuclear bomb. You just wouldn't believe the stuff that goes on, he said. That summer I learned I still had a lot to learn about the stuff that goes on. So I'll take you now to a footnote about the bikini. The archaeological record shows that the existence of bikini-style garments dating back to before the time of the ancient Romans, but the modern bikini appeared on the scene shortly after the end of World War II. Its name emerged out of a competition between two French designers, Jacques Heim and Louis Réard. In the summer of 1946, as Western Europeans began to head to the beaches again after years of war, Heim, a native of the celebrated beach resort, introduced a tiny two-piece bathing suit he called l'Atom. While European women had been wearing two-piece swimsuits since the 1930s, Heim's design pushed the envelope by its sheer skimpiness. Proud of his creation, Heim hired skyriders to fly over local beaches in order to promote the world's smallest bathing suit. Just 3 weeks later, Heim learned that he had competition. Réard, formerly a French automobile engineer, had turned his hands to swimsuit design. Réard's design, which he called bikini, was very similar to l'Atom, only slightly smaller, and engineered to expose the navel. According to Réard, unless it could be pulled through a wedding ring, it wasn't a real bikini. In the summer of 1946, this competition was won by Réard and the name bikini. He chose the name because he wanted it to shock. Just as the bombs that were tested by the US military, megaton atomic bombs in the Marshall Islands, devastating communities, the ocean, soldiers, and animal test subjects included. I tell you this to show one more time how the atomic filters through our culture. This is the symbol of Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge gathers itself together inside concrete laboratory buildings and lush green valleys. The city spins itself together inside the glowing Chernikov blue radioactive pools where millions of billions of neutrons are produced in a second, making heavy isotopes for the creation of elements such as californium, curium, and plutonium. Oak Ridge keeps itself together by crafting elements to propel nuclear bombs, cause and cure cancers, and spin satellites and shuttles deep into outer space. The city brings itself together in secret, spinning a delicate balance between explosion and implosion, fission and fusion, through a mysterious substance called fog bank. Oak Ridge hurls itself together in public in its museum with its story of atomic prophecy, wartime secrecy, and patriotic sacrifice. The city seals itself together with little atoms and acorns affixed to its laboratories, high schools, and pawn shops, like the rivets in denim that reinforce areas of high tension. Oak Ridge throws itself together in the whirl of the atom and the acorn, like a Mondrian dancing with Peggy Guggenheim, like a wolf circling before sleep. When I watched the joy of painting as a child, I fell into a hallucinatory, chromophilic space of attentive distraction. I never painted alone, never picked up a brush or prepared a canvas. I watched in order to lose myself in the soft, slow world of color and craft conjured by Bob Ross. His permed hair and gentle voice were hypnotic. My friends and I delighted in using his catchphrases, "Let's get crazy," and "no mistakes, just happy accidents." We applied his dictums to our lives, mockingly at first, but then over time, the words took on an earnestness we didn't expect. Bob Ross had a way of getting inside us. Then one day, he painted a mushroom cloud, only to quickly cover it over with a winter scene. Was this a way of getting crazy, a mistake, a happy accident, a subliminal message delivered by a former Air Force Master Sergeant turned mild-mannered hobby painter? The episode started with a list of the necessary paint colors needed for the show. They marched across the screen in all capital letters: titanium white, phthalo blue, dark sienna, Van Dyke brown, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, Indian yellow, bright red. The chromatic names invited the imagination to travel to faraway places and dwell in dream worlds of color. Aristotle and Plato conceived of color as a kind of drug, a pharmacon. Walter Benjamin thought that children were particularly sensitive to color, and that when they engaged with their books, boundaries between themselves and the colorful text dissolved. They found themselves inside the pictures. In Chromophobia, David Batchelor describes color as a loss of consciousness, a kind of blindness that can result in a temporary loss of focus, identity, or self. But color can also spark a moment of self-recognition, encourage a gaze, or elicit new attention. Color is orienting and disorienting by turns. The show, when Bob Ross painted the mushroom cloud, began like so many others. He greeted the viewers and laid out the plan. Ross told us, "Today I thought we'd do a fantastic little winter scene that I thought you'd enjoy." Then he approached the canvas, and he said it was covered with a nice thin layer of liquid white, all slick and ready to go. The brushwork started, and the slow motion of his hand and voice created a kind of soft machine of color and form. He said, "Let's make a beautiful warm little sky up here, just using a bit of yellow. A lot of time winter scenes can be so cold that they're almost distracting. So I thought today we'd make one that's very warm and very pleasant. I'm going to get a little red. It's very strong and will get your whole world on fire in just a heartbeat. Red's a very warm color. It makes you feel good." With these words, my heart was on high alert. Ross had painted the shape of an enormous yellow mushroom cloud and began garnishing it with red, adding depth and menace. My 20th century nightmare began to emerge in warm, oily hues. The canvas became a threshold between the atomic unconscious and a winter afternoon at the end of the Cold War. I thought of my friend Melissa, who was convinced she could detect the color of people's auras. She diagnosed my aura as yellow, a canary-colored rhyme with Bob Ross's creation. That other great theorist of aura and color, Walter Benjamin, wrote, "Pure color is the medium of fantasy, a home in the clouds for the child." Bob Ross continued. He said, "Now let's come in very gently, very gently. Let's just rub in a happy little cloud. See this dark area here? Don't kill it. That's your friend. It's all right if people look at you like you're a little strange. You tell them we gave you permission. You need those dark areas in there. That's the only way. Now then shoot. Let's get crazy. Don't fight it. Use it. Use it to your advantage. Allow those colors to just come together. Just make a decision and pop them in. In your world, you can do anything you want to do. It's just that easy, that easy. Just let things happen, evolve. Don't worry about it. Just get an idea in your mind, let it go, drop it in wherever. Everything's not great in life. I tell you what, let's get crazy. In your world, you just sort of make a big decision and just drop it in. In the end, Ross created a landscape painting with a steel-colored lake and snow-streaked trees illuminated by an iridescent, citrus-hued winter sunset. Underneath it all was the painted-over yellow mushroom cloud diffused into the sky. The episode opened up a space for the atomic uncanny to emerge, what Joe Masco refers to as a perceptual space caught between apocalyptic experience and sensory fulfillment. Under the influence of the joy of painting, I felt as if I had entered the painted televisual scene and that I was suffused like a cloud with the riotous colors of the world of pictures. I felt as if Bob Ross had painted the atom bomb in me as just another happy accident. My grandfather kept a small burgundy photo album in his workshop. I liked to leaf through it as I watched him work. Most of the photos were of family members, my brother, my cousins, my grandmother hamming it up for the camera. But two mysterious black and white snaps featured ghost white 18-wheeler that my grandfather drove during his tenure as an atomic courier for the AEC. One photo depicts the truck up close. The machine looks alive and friendly. The headlights are round and seemingly innocent. The driver's side door is open in a welcoming gesture, and the wheels are turned towards the camera and the person looking. There's a black framed rectangle below the windshield containing the word white, written in script. Another lower rectangle contains the symbols US government E-01042. The strangest element is the man in a fedora popping up through the top of the cab. His face is hidden by shadow, but I know that the man is my grandfather. And in this photo, he appears as Athena, the goddess of handicraft and warfare, who was born from the head of Zeus. The second photo shows the same truck from a distance. It was this one that gave a real sense of the vehicle's size and length, something that could not have been grasped from the first photo alone. The experience of taking in these two images together is like looking at a dachshund from the front and then from the side. A semi-trailer truck and a wiener dog both need to be observed from at least two angles to really appreciate them. In the second photograph, the truck sits parked in a western landscape, mountainous and dotted with small, scrubby plants. Half the photograph is washed out in black, a photographer's mistake, thumb over the viewfinder, a shutter only half open. The effect heightens the unknowableness of the image, not in terms of what is outside the frame, which we often talk about with photographs, but the absolute mystery of what is inside the 3.5 inch by 3.5 inch square. We can't know what the whiteness of the truck contains. Fellow drivers on the interstate in the spring of 1968 couldn't know either. They were unaware that dangerous things were zooming along the road beside them. Nor did my grandfather know. That information was above his security clearance. What we do know is that these two photographs document trips across the Atomic Highway stretching from Oak Ridge to Los Alamos to maybe Hanford, Washington, and back again. When I think about these photographs, I think about my grandfather being irradiated as he drove. Many couriers were. I think of him in the regular course of his work, irradiating the highway, irradiating all of America. I think of him trucking across the land in the government's enormous whiteout bottle on wheels, attempting to obscure the very phrase it was writing with its tires, driving the conspicuously inconspicuous machine, trying hard to say, nothing to see here. When I was young, I began each day by ripping off a sheet on my daily The Far Side calendar. I delighted in visiting the gonzo world created by the cartoonist Gary Larson, featuring women in horn-rimmed glasses, rotund middle-aged men, nerdy children, and a menagerie of thoughtful animals. Many of these cartoons stand out clearly in my memory. There's the one where the kid is pushing on the door that says "pull" in front of the Midville School for the Gifted. Another depicts a happy guy in hell whistling as one devil says to the other, "You know, I think we're just not reaching that guy." Gary Larson's cartoons were clever, offbeat, and occasionally macabre. One of Larson's darkest drawings depicts a post-human world after a nuclear attack. In the foreground, 5 happy bugs dance in a circle on a leaf. The arrangement of the dancing resembles that of the dancers in Matisse's famous painting, The Dance. Behind the twirling insects, though, there is a series of rolling hills, then a city being torn apart. Buildings crumble, signifying the end of that city, maybe all cities. The bugs seem intoxicated by the disorienting power of the 3 mushroom clouds exploding in the distance. The human world hangs in apocalyptic abeyance as the joyous insects dream of the world to come. For a while, when I was about 10, I went through a phase where sometimes after school I smoked clandestinely behind the 7-Eleven. Stallion was my brand of choice. The packaging had 2 black beauties galloping across an open white expanse under a solid stripe of red. The logo was a bit crude, and one of the horse's legs was bent at an impossible angle. Still, the running equine image combined with the illicit activity made me feel free. With a stallion in my hand, I had the perfect prop to act the detective, the rebel, the spy. My mother didn't allow candy cigarettes, and later they were banned by the state with a small s, so Tennessee. Those in favor of the ban argued that candy cigarettes romanticize smoking, and that playing at smoking could provide a gateway to the real and dangerous practice. When I could no longer pretend at smoking, I took up atomic fireballs as my candy of choice. Atomic fireballs were bright red cinnamon-flavored jawbreakers with a corpse white core. Red, hot flavor, the original super intense cinnamon candy. 15 million of these spicy gems are consumed every week around the world. Kids dare each other to eat them, one after another after another. How much hot can you handle? This was the dare of sweet proliferation that the Ferrera Pan Company peddled. The experience of eating these candies was often one of too muchness, a tingling, burning sensation on the tongue. Those little spheres would get too hot, and I'd have to take them out of my mouth for a break, holding them between my thumb and forefinger. Atomic fireballs were never banned, never even controversial. My mom thought that they were fine, but that it was tacky to take half-eaten candies out of your mouth and put them back in again. The cinnamon candies, which I imagined to be radioactive, were part of my atomic socialization, part of how I came to understand that the atomic was a wild challenge to win. Through my little candies, I learned that with practice and perseverance, the atomic could be controlled. The benefits outweighed the costs. How much hot could I handle? I was a miniature collector. I had an electric blue trapper keeper filled with garbage pail kids. The grotesque cards depicted children with rhyming or approximately rhyming names. Bony Tony, unzipping his face to reveal a cracked skull underneath. Snowy Joey, being suffocated inside a menacing snow globe. Deaf Jeff, a cool kid in an inky black motorcycle jacket with a boombox to his ear. The power of the music exploding half of his face, his eyes, mouth, and pink brain flying out with musical notes, and dozens of others like these. Set side by side, the cards could function as the school photographs of an elementary school in hell. The garbage pail kids illustrate all the kinds of terrible things that could happen to a person. Hundreds of our unconscious fears laid out in bright colors. They smelled sweetly stale because of the brittle piece of pink bubblegum that came like a stowaway in their packaging. They were malleable, macabre objects, and they could be kept as a card or peeled off as a sticker and stuck almost anywhere. Like kudzu, they covered the landscape of my youth. Some teachers and parents felt the situation had gotten out of control and garbage pail kids were banned from school. After the ban, I had to work in secret, sneaking them out during recess. When my mother picked me up from school with my brother already sitting in the front seat, I could slide in the back and work out in the open. There I would reorganize my collection, making sure not to bend the cardboard edges as they slid into their plastic envelopes. I never kept my garbage pails as stickers. I always organized them neatly in their plastic cases in alphabetical order. The first card, my favorite, and the one that scared me most was Atom Bomb. He was a little kid, but he wore a dark blue suit with a yellow and red striped tie. He looked like the guy from AC/DC. He had his finger on a red button, pressing it, the top of his head exploding into a mushroom cloud, his blue eyes glassy, a lazy smile on his face. My blue eyes would fall on his to find that he was already pressing the button. The pressing created an explosion, but also a pause. It exploded the continuum of history. The pressing was a warning of what could happen and a reminder of what already had. Riding in the back seat of the 20th century, I was acutely aware of the destructive power of nuclear technologies. I was born under the atom acorn symbol of Oak Ridge. As an adult, I moved through the world with the image inked on my left forearm. Following my grandfather, I am also a kind of atomic courier. I carry and disseminate the secret messages of atomic Appalachia through living, speaking, and writing about where I'm from. When Walter Benjamin was writing about his own childhood in Berlin, he developed a theory that suggested that the things we are surrounded by when we are young are formed inside of us, absorbed. As we wander through the world of things, he writes, they first seem mysterious, like the stations of a journey of whose extent we can form no conception. But slowly over time, as we confront these familiar objects, we take them in, feel our places within and among them, even feel part of them. Benjamin connects these things inside us, accrued during our childhood, to our abilities to perform mimetically, a power that is enhanced by moonlight and memory, which can create a kind of force field. Benjamin meant something different by this kind of moonlight than I do. He was thinking about southern moonlit nights in Ibiza or Naples, places far away from atomic Appalachia. but a suggestion of a connection between childhood memories and a kind of force field resonates. This force field, which for Benjamin is nearly cosmic, emerges from a power to be like those things that surround us. It is a feeling of connectedness that emerges when we find ourselves in places shot through with memory. In these places, we feel a part of things, and we feel things from those places as a part of us too. Growing up in the atomic sensorium, I felt something akin to Benjamin's force field. I felt animated by a kind of power coming from Oak Ridge and my connection to the atomic city. I often felt like the acorn inside the twirling atom, the city's symbol, something ordinary made extraordinary through a field of power. Sometimes my feelings of connection with the objects and spaces of my childhood were more complicated. They interrupted this smooth spinning. In these moments of interruption, or as Fred Moten might say, hesitation, I felt a sense of vulnerability combined with an attraction I struggled to understand. I realized that along with these moments of pleasure and the warm feeling of power, there were always moments when I was uncomfortable. There were times when I was uneasy inside the unhesitating, overly confident culture built on the principles of atoms for peace and mutual assured destruction. Today, these uncomfortable feelings are only more pronounced. I've become keenly attuned to the creepy and creeping resonances of an atmosphere of danger that is sometimes merely a weak sensation and sometimes completely overwhelming in nuclear things and places. I've become hyper aware of the atom bomb inside me. On anxious days, I feel it ticking, keeping pace with the hands on the doomsday clock, reaching for midnight. Thank you very much. I will unshare my screen. Can I do that, or do you do that, Victoria?
I think I can do that on my end.
Oh, I think I can do. Oh, yeah, there we go.
Here we go. Well, thank you so much, Lindsey. That was so poetic, and you painted such a great image of life with this knowledge of the atomic, this sort of looming over you. That's, yeah, really, really became very clear in your readings. So thank you so much. So I will open up the chat for anybody who may have a question. I'll read them aloud for Lindsey, and we'll see if we can get some answers for you. While we're waiting for your questions to roll in, I have a quick question for you. I was just thinking your research and your books and what I've learned about you so far, you really allude to this nostalgic image of an atomic city with like a secret, but it's sort of this cool mystery in a way. So how do you feel that the exhibition of BOMBHEAD and the way that this exhibition has been laid out, and there is a lot of like atomic ephemera within this exhibition, this collection of artwork. I'm just curious if there's a piece in the exhibition in particular that you felt really aligns with the way that you speak about the atomic and your experiences with it.
That's a really good question. There's a lot of pieces from the collection that I think really speak to me. But I think a lot of the ephemera that comes from atomic stuff and what I showed today, right, is very overt. I mean, much of it is very overt. And I think the atomic is so much creepier. Like we have this like spectacular, but so much creepier as well. And forgive me, I can't remember the name of the artist, but one of the things that I find the most affecting is the photography from Japan that has the gloved hands.
Yes, that's Roy Kyoko. my apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but it's the Stoned Glove series that you're talking about. Really powerful.
Yeah, the Stone Glove series really gets me. I feel very emotional about that, and I can't even fully form that into words, but really beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the way, just the way those images are formatted, even, and the way that they're displayed is powerful. Let alone the imagery itself. It's really strong work for sure. Thank you for answering my question. I've got another question that's just rolled in here from Bo. They're saying, what a wonderful presentation, Lindsey. Your description of your atomic experiences and formations are very rooted in your perspective as a child at the time. How did the engagement or detachment of the adults strike you at the time?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Bo, and thank you for that question. I think for a long time, I accepted the culture that was given to me, right? So I think a lot of my work is trying to struggle with a bit of like, how do you love a place and people that are so connected to violence? So I think there's some moments maybe in this book and in my previous book where I have some moments of realization. You know, the moment about there's this moment that I read where I find out that where bikini comes from a little bit. I find out sideways, right? And I wanted to put that with this moment of my own sort of selfish, childish insecurity about my body, alongside this this very strange adoption of the imagination of what happened to the Bikini Island, right? So I tried to juxtapose these side by side, and I think my whole life I've been just trying to piece together these kind of moments. It's sort of my work. In this book is definitely like my adult imagination of my child's imagination. And I'm trying to get at like what I knew before I knew it. So I think of these moments where something clicked or shifted for me about these kind of connections to violence. I won't go on too long, but I'll share one more story. I remember going to the Museum of Science and Energy in Oak Ridge when I was a child, and there's very little depiction of anything beyond just an empty, devastated city of Hiroshima or Nagasaki. And I remember the first time I saw a photograph of a victim in Nagasaki whose back is very badly charred. And it just really shocked me. What it was first kind of, I was maybe 7 or 8, but a kind of first impression of what it meant to make atomic bombs and to use them.
Yeah, very. You're really. I guess. I'm just sort of thinking from my background. Oh, Bo says thank you. That you're almost in a way sheltered from certain things when you grow up around it. Like I grew up in a military family, moving from base to base, and you're aware of the negative effects, but you're almost sheltered from it, and there's more pride than there is negative context. So yeah, I really feel like I can relate to what you're explaining, and this like nostalgic, these moments, these memories of your childhood, and making these connections and thinking, oh, how is it that I've thought about it or I felt about it that way at that time, and maybe it's problematic now looking back on it. Very interesting journey to be on for sure. Okay, I think, oh, here we go. We've got another question that's just rolled in here from Rachel. They're saying, thank you for sharing your work. Love the way your work connects personal histories of intimate moments to large scale and many scaled histories. I have a question about your new book projects that you mentioned at the beginning of the talk. Do you see connections between your earlier writing and connections to personal memory moments with either or both of your current projects?
Thanks, Rachel. I do. I will say just a little bit about the running, and then I'll stick to the nuclear, since I think that's like what people are here for. But the running definitely has a lot of my personal history and thinking about the moment of when I emerged in the world and lived in the early 1980s and beyond. But with the Chernobyl project, it's actually very different, and it's been a real challenge because with Oak Ridge, I feel very confident that I can say things about that place, you know, because I'm from there. I know the plants, I know the accents, I just really know that place. And Chernobyl, I don't really know, you know, and my language skills aren't very keen in Ukrainian or Russian, and so it's a very different kind of project, and I'm meeting it much more at a remove right now. So I'll see how it will emerge, but the memory that's involved there, I'm trying to draw from the people who live there. As well as kind of the way outsider's memory, which I bring, and I'm trying to kind of put those alongside each other and see what happens, what can emerge of thinking about that place, which is just weirder and more complicated and more interesting and more devastating than I imagined even before starting to work on that.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think if we don't have any more questions, we will bring our lecture to a close. We're right on schedule today. I'm very proud of us. So I think I'll give you a moment, Lindsey, if you've got anything to say in close.
I'll just say thank you to the gallery again, and thank you to everyone who came. And it's, you know, I know it's late on the East Coast. I don't even know what time it is in the rest of the world, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you. It was a pleasure learning more about your work. Really appreciate you being a part of this series, and thank you everybody for turning up tonight. We appreciate having you here, and like Lindsey said, if you're on the other side of Canada or the other side of the world, we really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to listen to Lindsey's wonderful talk. Just quickly before I let everybody go, just a reminder to mark your calendars for our final speaker in this lecture series. Michael Love will be joining us on Thursday, July 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. That would be BC time. So I hope to see you all then, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks again, Lindsey.
Thank you.
Goodbye.